Okay, my name is Peter Blum. I'm 47 years old. Today is October 26th, 2004. We're in Grand Central Station, and I am the son of the person I'm interviewing.
I'm Randi Blum, and I'm 77 years old, and we're in Grand Central Terminal on October 26th, and I'm Peter's mother. Lucky me.
Okay, so I'm going to basically go through just a little bit of life history questions and do it chronologically. Start out with early childhood stuff, and I just thought I'd open it with just a general, any recollections you have about your mother and your relationship with your mother. I guess I'm talking about, prior to when she got really sick.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was an only child, and my mother my mother adored me, thought I was the most beautiful child in the whole Bronx, the most intelligent, the most beautiful. She was very loving and very attentive and very caring and very beautiful. I adored her. I think when my father left the relationship, left the marriage, she was devastated. Even though it wasn't the greatest marriage, it was very painful for her that he left. And at that period, that was he left when I was 9 years old, so that's about 1936. She was devastated. It was just Jewish people didn't get divorced. Only actors or not nice people. It was just not something that Jewish people did. And she basically hid that fact from the world around her. Obviously not from me, I knew that. And I hid the fact that my mother and father were separated. They never legally divorced, but they separated. And I created this lie that my father was a traveling salesman, and no, he wouldn't be home this week. No, he wouldn't be home next week. He might be home the following week. Well, of course, the following week I had another story. No, he was called away. And so my circle of friends were not aware that that I came from a separated home. It was a very painful time because although I wasn't close to him, he was sort of part of my history. And with his leaving, also his sisters, who I adored, his sisters, I felt left me also. So it was not only that he left me, I felt that his sisters did not like me, and they too left. And that was very painful because they were the exciting women in my life. They were the communists and the vegetarians and the nudists and all the intellectual things. I had gone hitchhiking with them and did a lot of interesting things.
Can I just, if you, I definitely want to talk about that stuff a lot more. But I'm just curious, before we get into that, any more that you want to share about, maybe the pre-9-year-old memories of your mother? Do you have any specific memories that you want to share about that, about time with her?
We did a lot of things together. For instance, she and I would go on a vacation together. My father didn't join, so We enjoyed each other. She worked hard, so that I also am aware of the time we lived with my father's parents, my grandparents, because she worked in the store. They had a little grocery store, and she worked with him, so she wasn't home a lot. So it was a combination. When she was with me, it was a very full with me, but there was a lot of hours that she wasn't. And I think I may have told you this. My grandparents only spoke Yiddish, so of course I spoke Yiddish fluently up until the time I was about 6 years old. As a matter of fact, my Yiddish was probably better than my English.
When you went on vacation, where did you go?
We went to a place in New Jersey. What I remember about it mostly was we went on a horse and carriage buggy ride. That's about the strongest thing I remember. I don't remember other things about the place, but I do remember this horse and buggy and loving it and enjoying it.
And it was always just you and your mother?
Yeah, I don't remember ever going on a vacation with my father and included. I have no memory of that.
So your mother was always working in the store?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It was a little grocery store. It was quote-unquote successful, but they worked 7 days a week, both of them, even though she had a heart condition and she really wasn't supposed to, but she did. And I think that was one of the reasons that it was painful when they separated. She lost all gains that the store had. My father took over the store, and his family took it over, and she didn't get any financial gains from whatever the store was worth, and it was successful. As a matter of fact, the year before they separated, by the way, I didn't know that the marriage was on the rocks. Whatever was going on between the two of them was sort of hidden from me, so that I was not aware of what was happening, and that's why his leaving was really like a shock in a sense, because somehow I think, and this was part of my mother's trying to cover up and trying to make it as though it was okay, so that there was never, it's not as though they fought and I could hear them arguing or anything. There was nothing like that. And so it was really a shock when he left. The year before he left, my mother sent me to a summer camp, a very, very, very special summer camp. And I had a whole outfits and blankets. It was practically like a trousseau that she had to get ready for me to go to this special camp. The year after he left, of course, my mother couldn't afford this elegant camp, and I went to something. It was a settlement camp, and she was so concerned. How would I fare in this settlement camp? And I loved it. I had a fabulous time, and I reassured her, not just to reassure her, but I really did have a wonderful time. And I think I still have some of the letters I wrote telling her that I loved the camp and it was great and it was just as good as a rich camp, and etc. So, but our lifestyle definitely changed. There was no question about it. There were radical changes.
Yeah. And was she sick from your earliest childhood, or was that...
No. She did have a heart condition, but she worked and she shopped and she did, all the things that housewives did, plus working. She had a stroke when I was about 15, and that was, probably the result of the fact that she had this, she really did have a heart condition. As a matter of fact, she was not supposed to have children. And part of the reason, probably, that I'm an only child is that she was told not to have any more children because of her heart condition. But the last after her stroke, of course, she was, she was totally debilitated and had to stay in bed, but was home. My grandmother, her mother, took care of her. I did somewhat, but basically her mother did most of the daily care.
This was from when you were 15. You said that was really
About, yeah,
really
about 14 and a half, 15. Yeah, you're right about that. Mm-hmm.
And I know you've always expressed that you wished you had siblings, and that was. Do you remember your childhood as being lonely in some sense, or?
I think so. Yes, I would say yes, because I do have memories of my playing outside the store, by myself, either with jacks or with a ball, but I don't remember it with being anybody. So I think my wish that I had siblings, and I always, when I hear about siblings today and everything I do, I romanticize it, something I didn't have. I think that particular desire was somewhat minimized when I saw the other thing of siblings who fought with each other, a lot of jealousy, and so both were true. But I think I would say I was lonely. Yeah, I was lonely. Mm-hmm.
Are there any good friends you remember from? I'm talking about again from the earliest period. I don't know, maybe 13 and below, from young childhood.
No, I don't remember any friends at that. No.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. I do remember one little girl. I didn't have a doll carriage until later on, but I had a shoebox that I pulled around, and I do remember doing this with a little girl, but I it's not a clear memory at all. Yeah.
Okay. And you had mentioned that the Yiddish was almost your first language at home. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. Up until a time I was 6, and then when I went into the public school system, and at that time the public school system was very much, they were mostly Irish Catholic teachers and Irish Catholic principal. I remember that very vividly. And I lost that Yiddish accent very quickly. It was not something that anybody thought it was charming or cute, or it was just made fun of. And I really felt the discomfort of that experience.
Did your parents speak Yiddish to you also?
No, my mother spoke English to me. My father did too.
Gotcha.
But they spoke Yiddish. They spoke both to each other. They spoke Yiddish and English to each other.
Right. It was just that you spent so much time with your grandparents.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is your mother's parents we're talking about?
No. In the early years, it's my father's parents who really I spent a lot of time. And they didn't speak English, or barely spoke English. But of course, at that time in that neighborhood, around it was around the Bronx Park area, a lot of kids spoke Yiddish in the street, so it was fine until I got into school, and then it was not at all. Yeah.
So, okay, we'll switch to your father now. Unless there's anything else you wanna share, particularly about your mother and memories of her.
I think I've said, as much as I can remember about her. Just that, she was really quite loving and quite strong, and so very important in my getting a sense of what kind of a person I was. I might also add, who knows, we might have ended up disagreeing politically, as I took one path and I think she would have taken another. But that never came to the test. But I am aware that would have been a possibility. Who knows, anyway.
Right. Okay, so your father, kind of the same first general question, just, obviously pre-9-year-old memories of him.
They're so vague. I I don't remember, like, the things. I don't remember sitting on his lap. I don't remember talking to him. I remember seeing him in the store. That I do remember, talking to customers. But I don't have any strong memories of he and I together. You know, I'm assuming we did something together. I just don't remember. And so I can maybe come to the conclusion we didn't do that much together.
Okay.
I mean, I know he never hit me, whatever that's worth, but I think he also never said too much to me either. So, yeah.
Okay, so I guess to get to the event of your father leaving, a little bit more about that. Just my understanding is that he was also negligent with the child support and all of that. That
Indeed,
was
yes,
yeah.
indeed he was. And it was really a very disturbing period because there was a court case. He initially didn't give any money to support my mother or me. We would have been out, if not on the streets, in welfare if it weren't for my grandmother, my mother's mother. And then a judge finally made a decision that he had to give, I think it was an amount like $35 a month. It was or maybe $35 a week. It was a very minimum amount, and he never did. And he went to jail for non-payment of support for me, and it was really for me, not for my mother. And that happened at least twice and possibly 3 times that he went to jail. Matter of fact, sometimes when I used to pass that jail, and I go, that's where my father was for not paying any support. And it was occasionally he'd come to visit me, and I was always angry with him, and would say you don't take care of me, and he'd always give me stories about, well, some people can live on $20 a week, and why can't you? And he was totally out of any reality in terms of a father or supporting a daughter. Or he was pretty disgraceful on that level. And at the sad thing also was that I felt he was getting support from his sisters, these sisters that I had loved, and I couldn't understand that they could allow him to do this. And maybe later on I'll talk about some of the things I brought up with them when I met them later on. But it was very painful to me because these were my heroines, the very vital sisters. The family, there were 3 brothers and 3 or 4 sisters, 4 sisters in that family. And the 3 brothers were quite passive and inarticulate. The 4 sisters were very articulate, very vital, very vibrant, very intellectual, et cetera, et cetera. So it was quite a family in terms of
You want
male,
to say
female.
their names?
Of the sisters? Sure. Well, there's my Aunt Frida, who was a communist, and Rita, or Rachel we used to call her. And, of course, my favorite was Bella. I adored Bella. And Lily. Lily was the oldest. But I was really closest to Bella. I used to hitchhike with Rachel to visit Bella. Bella had a home in Goldensbridge, and we would hitchhike and go up there during that period. I loved that. That was very exciting to me.
She kept that home up until right?
Very recently, right. Of course, by the time you saw it, the shape was pretty sad and pretty dilapidated. But at the period when I used to go, when I was 7, 8, I guess 7, 8, and 9, it was like a palace to me, So that it was always a simple cabin. I don't mean to, but they really let it get really dilapidated by the time you saw it.
And so your father stayed in the Bronx, more or less in the neighborhood, during this whole period?
I don't know where he stayed, now that you mention. I never went to any home that he was in. I don't know.
But you mentioned that when he went to jail, it was kind of in the neighborhood. And
That's true, it was in the Bronx. Yeah, you're right. But that wasn't his home. But where he lived, I don't know. Did he? I think he may have lived with one of his sisters, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
And he kept the grocery store.
Oh, yeah. He did keep the grocery store. This gets complicated, Peter, and I don't know the full details, but one of his brothers so-called bought it from him, and it was something under the table, not clean, not nice. Bottom line is my mother got zilch, literally zilch, and all that.
Did you see him at the grocery store? Or?
Probably I did. Yeah, because the groceries, we lived around the corner, and I probably did see him on the grocery. Not that much, but I probably did after they separated.
But you had really very limited contact.
Very limited. And when he came to the house, I mean, it was just hostile and arguing and ugly, and I'd send him away and just feel angry, and I felt angry with him, and there was just a little piece of me that hoped that they would get together, not because only then I wouldn't have to be this daughter of a separated family and have these lies. So there was that piece of me, because I do remember that. But in actuality, what would happen is, it was just, I can't call it a dialogue, but just my being furious with him and his coming up with unbelievable rationale of why he didn't give any money. I mean, he was sort of inferring that my mother's brother had taken money. It was all pretty low, pretty low. By the way, my uncles, my mother's brothers, came through beautifully during that period when we were separated. And I credit them, both Jack and Oscar, both of them. I mean, they were, they always included me in going out socially and things like that. And I think they were very instrumental in the fact that I have a healthy attitude about males, and I don't use my father as a role model. That they were role models for me. They just really came right in there and did whatever they could to fill the gap of having a male role model.
So about going back to your mother now again, you want to talk about how she died and how old you were and what the circumstances were?
It's hard. She, after her stroke, she was incapacitated. She was in bed a lot of the time. And she'd sometimes sit in front of the window. I think she hoped that she would be able to. She couldn't move her left hand or her left leg after the stroke. It was very painful going home and seeing her like that, because she was so vibrant and she wasn't. And then it got to the point where she couldn't even sit in the chair. She would sit in a chair near the window. And then it got to the point where she couldn't sit in the chair. She'd be in bed. And it was just very painful to see her deteriorate like that. And, there was, at that point, I knew, and we all knew that it was hopeless, that she wasn't going to get better. And she wasn't going to get better. And I think that was another thing that was so hard for her, that when she began to realize that she wasn't going to get the strength back in her arm or in her leg, that I think she didn't fight anymore, and that contributed to her total, physical debility. And then she had to be in bed. She couldn't get out of bed anymore.
And how long was it that she was sick before she died? Or another way to put that is, how old were you when she died?
Well, I was not 16, so it was about 9 months, maybe a year, 9 months to a year. And she died before my 16th birthday.
Now, I have some memory of you're talking about an ear infection. Am I mixing that up with something else?
The ear infection is mine,
Is yours.
not my mother's. I had, serious ear infection, as you know, and from the time I was 4 or 5, and that was before the beginning. I mean, there was no penicillin or sulfa, so the ear infection turned into a mastoid, and I had surgery. And as you know, I've had 4 or 5 surgeries, including when you were 2 years old. I had another surgery. You may remember, and you stayed with Elaine, and you don't remember, you stayed with Elaine and Fred while I was in the hospital. And then, of course, I had a surgery about 8 years ago or 10 years ago. So I've had about 4 mastoid surgeries. So, but not my mother,
And so after your mother died, you went to live with her parents?
Well, I was living with them. No, I lived with them. My mother and I lived with her parents after my father left. I think what happened is my mother, father, and myself, we had an apartment. And after my father left, my mother's parents came down from Canada to stay with her and take care of her and me, and just stay, and also helped us financially because there was no income at all. So they really supported. It's possible Jack and Oscar also contributed. I'm not sure about that, but that's very likely because there was no income.
And you had, I'm going to skip back now because you had mentioned that you were really disappointed with the sisters, with your father's sisters. Did you, at that time, between when you were in your teenage years, did you have contact with them, or did you talk?
Nothing, none whatsoever. They never tried to contact me. They never, and I didn't them. Just nothing. It was just a real, total abandonment. That was an added devastation somehow.
And what about the experience of living with your grandparents after your mother died?
That was hard because I was, and then I was becoming as a young woman and an adolescent, and their ideas of what girls should do and should not do, and boys. And it was hard having boys come to the home, although I did, but it was not easy. And their idea, well, of course, the period, it was a different period. So it was a combination of a different period and my grandparents. We finally got a phone. For a long while, we never had a phone, and we got a phone. But their perception of what a phone is you call to say, okay, I'm ready, I'll be there at 5 o'clock. You don't call and say, oh, I got a new lipstick, or I have a new blouse, or anything like that. So I still remember my grandfather, if I was on the phone more than 3.5 minutes, looking at his watch to remind me to get the hell off the phone. So it was a difficult time because they were of a generation that shouldn't be raising a 16-year-old. Whereas they loved me, they had strange ways of showing it. They were also were not very affectionate. I mean, I had a sense that they cared about me, but it was never anything physical or anything like that. What saved me, I think, is that I went to I lied about my age, and I went to summer camp as a counselor so that I could have experiences that a young girl can have without anybody looking over my shoulder. That was probably what saved me. Otherwise, I did resent the fact that that it was really difficult to bring anyone home. But I had no choice, really.
And where did you go to high school?
I went to an all-girls high school. It's called Walton High School. And at that time, you had to have, you took Latin and French, and it was a very, very prestigious girls' high school. Today, I understand things have changed. But it was an all-girls high school, so of course all we did is talk about the boys in Clinton High School, because that was a boys' high school. So, well, I don't know. I have mixed theories about whether co-ed is better or, well, I don't know. I haven't come to a bottom line yet. But I know that it was not the right decision for me at that time. I think I would have been better off in a co-ed high school and had, some of the freedom, and I think so. I don't know. Yeah.
Did you like high school?
I did. Yes, I did. There I had good friends, and also some of my political ideas began to form, and I had friends who worked with me. As a matter of fact, it was in high school. I think it was either 44 or 45, and we formed a committee for Henry Wallace for president, and that was a very exciting time in my life, and we got all involved with that, and that part was good, yes, in terms of waking up politically and having people who could share things with me and do things about it. And it was an exciting time. So yes, I think my bottom line is I did like high school. I liked a lot about it. Probably things I didn't like, but anyway.
Any friends you remember particularly from high school?
I remember. The answer is I do remember a number of them, although I don't see them anymore. But I remember the times we had together. I remember writing articles with them. I remember, talking about issues with them. Definitely, yeah. But I've lost touch. The friend that I did meet, and you've met her, Peter, was when I went to summer camp. I think I was 14 then, and I lied. I said I was 18. And I met Hadassah there. And I was determined when I went to that camp that I wasn't going to tell anybody that I was really 14. And, of course, I met Hadassah, and in 2 minutes I said, I'm really only 14, even though I had to say I was 18 to get the job. So, I met her at camp. But the people that I was close to politically in high school, I've lost touch with. Yeah.
And you met Nettie during that period also?
No. I didn't meet Nettie till much later. I met Nettie when in the committee to save the Rosenbergs. That was much later. I was already married. You weren't born yet, but it was much later than this period that I'm talking about. Yeah.
So, and then you went to Brooklyn College after that,
right? I went to Brooklyn College.
How did you make that decision? And tell me, you were still living at home when you went
I was
to Brooklyn College?
I was still living at home with my grandmother, and my grandfather died about 6 months after I went into Brooklyn College. I don't know why I chose Brooklyn College, except that I think some people that I knew went there, and so I was going to go there. That I loved. That was a wonderful experience. Also, because there were people there that I, shared a lot with, and there was a lot of excitement. It was a very exciting time to be in college, also, and that we had there were a lot of meetings and a lot of staying up late. I'd come home very late, even though I lived in the Bronx, and I used to travel from the Bronx to Brooklyn, and but I did it, and it was, I did like it a lot. But then, the part that, I dropped out of Brooklyn College.
After how long?
I think a year and a half, because I met Benjamin, and I met him I also at another. Where did I meet? Oh my goodness, no, I'm forgetting. I'm okay. My chronology is not to get too good. But anyway, I met Ben at a bookstore. I don't even know that, and he visited me at camp. I was again a counselor at camp. This time I think I was really 18. I didn't have to lie that much, and when we planned to get married, I dropped out of Brooklyn.
And how did you first get into working in the book business? And was that your first job?
Well, no, I had jobs where I had been a sales lady in a department store called Alexander's. I had done, different things. What else did I do? I think I babysat. Maybe I didn't do that many jobs, but a few other jobs. But that I got because we knew. I knew. I went to school with someone called Fred Bass, and Fred Bass owned the Strand bookstore, and I told him at that time that I needed to earn money, and did he have a part-time job? And that's where I met Dad, actually, in the bookstore. I was working part-time in the bookstore, and Dad got the full-time job.
Do you remember the name of the bookstore?
Sure. It's a Strand bookshop. You've heard of the Strand bookshop. Yeah, well, when I worked there, it wasn't as big as it is right now, but it still was definitely, you know what? I made a mistake. Okay. Fred Bass worked at the Strand bookshop. The job he got for me was an Arcadia bookshop. And I met Dad there, and we both we loved the bookshop, and we loved the boss. Although he was a sort of a strange character, and to this day, this happened like 58 years ago, maybe 59 years ago. Both Dad and I remember the phrase when we would ask him for anything, either a little raise or maybe take off a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday. His famous phrase was, "You're taking advantage of my good nature." Even though both of us worked, and particularly Ben worked so hard at that shop, and occasionally we use that phrase, and sometimes I'll say something like, "Pass the sugar," and he'll say, "You're taking advantage of my good nature." It had stayed with us for many, many years. So,
did you have any relationships before Ben that you remember? Or serious ones at all?
Not serious, intimate in the sense, not intimate. Serious, yes. They were very, they were very close and very supportive. As a matter of fact, at one period, one of the men that I went out who was not political, but I was, and I remember at that time I knocked on doors for a congressman called Vito Marcantonio, and he used to come with me, not because he cared for Vito Marcantonio, but he was so worried because this was in the East Bronx. It was a different period. People knocked on doors and I don't think I'd do that today in that particular section of the Bronx. But, that was very special, and I really, was so grateful that he did this and didn't try to stop me, but instead supported what I was doing.
How long did you date?
We met in camp, and months, maybe 9 months, a year with this particular man. And then there was someone before from the summer camp before. Usually it would be during the summer. The summer was the hot romance time. It was a different period than today, but anyway, it was hot romance for me the summer before. And then it would go into the winter maybe 3 or 4 months. And
Do you remember names?
I certainly remember Gene, yeah, very much.
He's the one that walked around with you.
Yeah, his last name was Jamin, Gene Jamin. I remember him vividly. And there was another guy, his name was Sandy, and they used to kid us at camp because Sandy and Randy, and so he lasted less. And there were 1 or 2 other people from camp that I can almost see faces, but I can't see a name. I can't remember a name.
So do you want to talk more about your memories of like the very first meeting Ben? What your very first reactions were? And
The first reaction when he walked into the store was, I thought, he's much too old for me. I thought he was much older than actually he was. And then when we started kidding around about things in the store, it was just like he was so delightful and easy to be with and had this sense of humor that I absolutely adored. He got younger and younger. And so I remember, I remember feeling, I hope he asks me out. And at that time, I was not ready to ask him out, but he did ask me out. And
how long after you first?
I would say pretty soon, but I think pretty soon after we met in the Arcadia bookshop is pretty soon. 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something like that. And it's funny, I was trying to think of some of the things we did, and I have just vague memories, but I like remember being with him and a lot of talking. There was a lot of talking, a lot of kidding, a lot of talking, and we used to go to a camp. It was called Nature Friends, and it was a beautiful, really rough place, and we'd go on trails there, and it was just great. We had lovely times there. So
This wasn't a camp in the.
not in the sense, no. It was called Camp Nature Friends. People came there. It wasn't like a camp like you think of camp, but people. A lot of Germans went there. A lot of Germans and a lot of immigrants went there, and it was a nature camp. It was called camp not because it was a camp, but because that's what they called it. And you could sleep there, and they had very, very primitive sleeping places, and just go on trails and swimming. And they had a gorgeous swimming pool, a really beautiful pool.
So this was a big day trip. It sounds like.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a day. You spent the day. I mean, it took maybe an hour or an hour and a half to get there. It wasn't that big. We never had a car, so we went by bus. I think once we went with Elaine and her first husband. I sort of have a memory of that. Her first husband was Hungarian, actually. I think they introduced us to it, and that's how we went there, I believe. I can't believe I forgot, but anyway, I think so.
So, and how long, when did you first start feeling like Ben was the one for you?
I think when I went away to camp and he wrote a lot, and I was like feeling stronger and stronger about. I wasn't so much that he was the one, but that if there was to be the one, it would be Ben. I mean, in my head, I had plans that I wasn't going to get married until I was like 26 or 28 or, something like that. That didn't happen, as you know. And I was still seeing this other guy, Gene, who I remember his name. And I wasn't ready yet to say to Gene, this is it, and we can't go out together. So what really propelled it is that Ben was ready to get married. I wasn't. And I somehow then got ready to get married or changed my mindset, and we decided to get married.
And do you remember, did it bother Ben that you were dating somebody else?
I don't think so. I think he felt that he must have had a sense of confidence that he was it. I don't remember. I don't think so. No. I would say no. No.
And do you remember how he proposed or how you first decided to get married? Circumstances?
He didn't get down on his knee. I can tell you what he didn't do. It was more or less, as I remember it, like talking about our living together. As a matter of fact, I think at one point we were even thinking that maybe we'd live together and then get married. It was all talk. That was never going to happen. But it wasn't a formal, will you marry me? It was like something that came out of everything that we were talking about and everything that we were doing together, and that this is what we would do together.
And did you decide to drop out of school then because tell me why.
I think there were two reasons. I think the main reason was that I felt that I knew both of us had to work if we were going to, get our own apartment. And so that I couldn't, just continue going to school. So I think that was the main reason. And so I dropped out.
What were you studying?
Political science. Of course, it was very, in the first year you do, kind of general things. But my goal was to be, something political. As I remember, I took a French class. I continued my French in college, and I took the class, and you had to say something, in French about yourself, or what. And what I said in the struggling French is that I want to be the first Jewish woman president. As you can see, I had very, very modest goals. Anyway, that was my French sentence.
And how long after you got married was it before you decided to open the business?
Very, very soon, because what happened was that I think, again, famous Milton, Dad wanted to take a half a day off or something, not on a Saturday, on a Wednesday, and Milton said no. I think this is my memory. So that was maybe 6 months after we married. I think it was very soon. And so Dad said, I'm going to go on my own. And that's what we did. I worked for a while, without, separately. I forgot, not very exciting jobs. I'm trying to think what I did. Once I worked for a company that sold these very special stamps, and I had to go to an exhibit and exhibit the stamps. But I earned money for a while so that we could, we could pay for bills.
Oh, and not in the book business?
Not immediately. I did pretty soon thereafter, maybe a year or so after.
A year or so after you started working with Ben.
A year or so after, yes, I went into the business with Ben. Yeah. Yes. That's my memory. About a year.
And you know what? I'm going to go back because we're just about out of time. Because I was really curious. I didn't I the chronology about you. You had mentioned Elaine. So tell me about meeting Elaine and when that happened.
Elaine was initially Betsy's friend, and I forget how we got to meet her, but at that time she was married to this man, Tony. And of course, meeting Elaine was like, having a whole other experience. And I think that was our first date. The four of us, she and her husband, and Ben and I went to this Camp Nature Friends, as I remember. And that's when I met Elaine before she married Fred.
And what about Penny?
And Penny I met, about 6 months later. Maybe a year later, because Elaine had already divorced Tony. She was living with Fred. And Elaine, I don't know how Elaine knew Penny, but at one time we went on some date or something, and Elaine said, well, this couple, Penny and Cy, are coming also. And of course, we just all, the six of us, clicked. Interestingly enough, I knew Penny when I was in Brooklyn College, but I knew her vaguely, and I didn't like her. And there was something off-putting about her. But when I saw her again with Elaine and with Cy, just six of us all, we just clicked.
So tell me a little bit about the starting the book or going into work at the book business. How was that for you?
Well, it was very stimulating. It was very exciting. I felt that I was learning so much, and I really felt justified in leaving college because I said, I'm learning so much and meeting people and reading things, even though we struggled a lot the first many years. The first many years, it was a real financial struggle. As a matter of fact, we'd sometimes not even have enough money to pay for the postage to ship the books that were going to wherever we made a sale. And the first office that we had was this crummy little small office, maybe about as big as this. Maybe this is about this size, with a phone, and it was in front of a shop of this presser, a press shop. And we didn't have a phone, so if a call came for an order, he would have to call us. And he'd call in this big, loud, frankly crude voice, and here we are trying to be so intellectual and so important, and with the steam going in his loud voice. So the first couple of first couple of years, and the building that it was in was a pretty much neglected building. So there were times like we worked on a Sunday, and we'd go up the stairs and there'd be some dead drunk on the stairs because, the neighborhood at that time was not quite as yuppie as it is now. And so that's where a lot of the drunks hid out. So the halls were so dark, and I'd be stepping on the stairs, and then the next thing I knew, I'd kick somebody who was lying there. But the business itself was very exciting, and I think I rationalized that. All right, I left school, but I'm learning, and I'm so alive, and I felt, although it was also struggling. It was not one thing. Sometimes I'd get discouraged. I think I got discouraged more than Ben did. That were we going to make it, and could we have a living out of this? And I don't know if you wouldn't remember, but when you were an infant, maybe I took you home from the hospital, Dad and I were seriously thinking, you don't remember, huh? We're seriously thinking, maybe we better do something else and accept that this isn't going to work financially. And we actually thought about doing court steno work. We were thinking of taking a course. I don't know where we got that idea from. Anyway, it never happened. The rest is history. But it was financially a struggle for a while.
And do you remember you worked very long hours?
Oh, we worked long hours, and there was no such thing as a Sunday. And yes, we did. We did.
Did you ever have like mixed feelings about that, or
Yes,
resent it? Or
yes, I did. I did. I almost preferred a knowing that, like the weekend is mine, and, and I don't have to. Yes, I did. I did. It was, there were both things going on, and sometimes one was stronger. There was the excitement and meeting people and learning things that I just never would have gotten in college. So that was exciting. And the concern and the kind of life, it was sort of, it was ongoing work, and I didn't like that.
Because you mentioned that when I was born, you were still really, really struggling. So that's already like 8 years into the business,
That's
right?
true. That is true. I think by that time, the struggle was not that severe, but it was also like, we're just barely making it, and so maybe we should do something else. So there were really struggles of, not making it, and as I say, not having the postage to pay the postage to send the package out, and maybe. It may have been when Carol was born. Maybe by the time you were born, things were a little easier. A little easier.
I'm kind of thinking how much would we
Well,
have?
it doesn't look like there's anybody
Okay.
here for the next appointment, so I mean we could do like another 5 or 10 minutes. If you
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
We'll keep on going
All
a
right.
bit.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We'll see
Right,
what
okay.
our limits are.
All right.
Yeah. So, and describe what the early years of the marriage were like for you. Were there any particular issues that you encountered? I'm talking about obviously before we were born.
There's always issues. I mean, I don't know how to. I don't know how to dig into that and give them, a label. I mean, there were not issues about. I mean, our values were similar. I mean, there were different ways that we had of doing different things. Yeah, I don't know how much I want to spin on that. I don't know how much I can spin on it. Sometimes I find, and this may surprise you, that it's hard for me to touch on what is happening, even when things are when something comes up which is not what I want in a relationship. I don't find it easy to say, oh, but this and this is happening, and this is something that we have to work on. So I it sounds general. Yeah, there were issues. Well, what else is new in a relationship? But it's hard for me to be more focused and more specific.
I mean, were you generally happy with the marriage?
I would say yes. I would say if I had a, without sounding happy, yes, the answer is I was happy. Were there moments when I said, gee, what am I doing in this marriage? Yeah, there were. But that was, that was minor, very minute.
I'm thinking maybe if we have, you know what? Maybe this is a good time to close off for now. I think we both, yeah.
Okay.
we can go back.
All right.